For centuries, we have been told crossing the Atlantic before Columbus was unthinkable. An ocean too vast, every survivor lost to myth. Yet, in the year 1311, the ruler of Mali sent 2,000 ships into that darkness, and they never returned. If black people truly reached America thousands of years before Columbus, why has that story been buried, and what else have we been asked to forget? The Atlantic was once the edge of the known world, a stretch of water so wide and so unforgiving that even the bravest sailors called it the Sea of Darkness. Medieval maps left its far side blank, warning of monsters and endless storms. For centuries, textbooks repeated the same story. No one could cross this ocean before the age of compass and chronometer. Longitude was guesswork. Ships were built for rivers and coasts, not the open sea. Hulls split under the weight of waves, sails shredded in Atlantic winds. Provisions spoiled, fresh water ran out, and the horizon offered only emptiness. Every failed attempt became a cautionary tale. The idea that anyone, let alone Africans, could launch a fleet into this unknown was dismissed as fantasy. Navigation, as taught in European schools, set the rules. Without precise instruments and without ironclad hulls, the Atlantic remained a barrier, not a bridge. This belief became a kind of law, shaping who could be imagined as an explorer and who could not. The impossible ocean stood as a wall between continents, a test that only the so-called discoverers were allowed to pass. Yet the story of those who dared to challenge that law, those who looked west and saw possibility instead of oblivion, waited just beyond the edges of the map. In the heart of the 14th century, in Cairo, a story traveled farther than any ship. Mansa Musa, ruler of Mali and the richest man alive, arrived for his legendary pilgrimage. When asked how he became king, Musa gave an answer that stunned the Egyptian court. His predecessor, he said, was obsessed with the horizon, fixated on the ocean that swallowed the sun. That king assembled a fleet, not of a handful, but of 300 ships filled with men, and 300 more packed with gold, water, and supplies. Their orders were simple. Do not return until you reach the farthest edge of the Atlantic, or until your water runs dry. Only one ship came back. The captain spoke of a current, strong as a river, pulling the rest into the unknown. Still unsatisfied, the king prepared a second, even greater armada. 2,000 ships, 1,000 for men, and 1,000 for provisions. He handed the throne to Musa, and he sailed west, vanished beyond the reach of news or memory. The chronicler Al-Umari wrote Musa's words, preserving them in his Masalik al-Absar. No other medieval historian recorded the tale, and the name of the voyaging king remains uncertain, lost in the gaps between Arabic manuscripts and oral tradition. But the scale is undeniable. Hundreds, then thousands of ships, launched into the Atlantic centuries before Columbus was born. The only trace left behind is a testimony, a king who would rather risk everything than accept the limits of the world he knew. The ocean, once a wall, became a question. What lies beyond the river and the sea? Between West Africa and the Americas, the Atlantic does not sit still. Its surface moves, a river hidden within the ocean, known today as the Canary Current. Flowing from the coast of Senegal and Gambia, this current sweeps westward, steady and relentless, carrying anything adrift toward the far side of the world. Its speed averages 1 to 2 knots, enough to pull a fleet of wooden ships thousands of miles without a single stroke of the oar. Sailors who enter its path find themselves pushed, not by wind or will, but by the physics of the planet. The return journey is another matter. The same current that carries you outward blocks your way home, turning a westward crossing into a one-way passage. For centuries, European navigators studied these flows, mapping their strength and direction, using them to fuel their own voyages of conquest. But the current itself does not care who rides its back. It offers the same path to any vessel brave or desperate enough to follow its pull into the unknown. In the archives of Spanish exploration, a brief, unsettling note surfaces, one that refuses to fit the standard script. Bartolomé de las Casas, The friar who preserved Columbus's lost journal recorded a story passed from the Taino of Hispaniola. They told of black men arriving by boat from the south and the southeast, armed with spears tipped in a gold and copper alloy called guanine. Columbus, ever the collector of rumors, took samples of this metal for testing. Spanish assayers found its composition, gold, copper, and silver, matched alloys used along the West African coast. The chronicler did not claim to see these strangers himself. He only wrote down what the islanders said and what the metal revealed. No names, no settlements, just a shadow. Black visitors arriving from somewhere beyond the horizon, then vanishing into the fog of oral memory. Some would later call this coincidence, others a clue. But the report remains, stubborn and unclaimed, a detail that lingers in the margins of official discovery. Columbus sailed west in 1492, holding a conviction so strong it shaped every entry in his journal. These new lands were not a new world, but the edge of Asia. He called them the Indies, searching for Cipangu, his word for Japan, while mapping coastlines he believed belonged to Cathay. For years, every bay and river was measured against Marco Polo's stories, not the possibility of another continent. In his logs from 1492 to 1504, Columbus recorded indigenous names and gold ornaments, but insisted he had found a shortcut to the riches of the East. Bartolomé de las Casas, who preserved Columbus's lost diary, noted how the admiral clung to this idea, even as the evidence grew stranger. The maps of Europe redrew themselves around his mistake. The myth of discovery was born not from finding something new, but from refusing to see what was already there. The Americas became Asia by decree, not by fact, and everything that did not fit was filed away or ignored. In the jungles of Veracruz, stone faces taller than a man stare out from another age. The Olmec heads, some rising over 3 meters and weighing more than 20 tons, were carved from basalt hauled nearly 100 kilometers. Their features, broad-nosed and full-lipped, have sparked arguments for generations. Some see echoes of West Africa, others insist they are the faces of local rulers, shaped by hands that never left the continent. Laboratory tests on gold and copper artifacts from these sites show alloys, copper at 98% with traces of gold and silver, matching the recipes of ancient Mesoamerica, not West Africa. The heads endure, silent and massive, refusing to fit neatly into any story. Each one is a fact, not a theory, a presence that demands explanation, even as the textbooks look away. In 1976, Ivan van Sertima published They Came Before Columbus, sparking a conversation that refused to fade. His book gathered oral histories, archaeological hints, and overlooked chronicles, weaving them into a challenge to the official record. For decades, these ideas traveled outside university walls, spoken in church basements, community centers, and on radio waves. Public lectures filled halls from Harlem to Houston. Archival recordings from the 1980s and the 1990s capture scholars and elders debating the meaning of stone heads, gold alloys, and ocean currents. Even as textbooks clung to the Columbus story, a parallel history found life through books, grassroots seminars, and late-night call-in shows. The debate never disappeared. It lived in the margins, carried by those unwilling to let the story end where the curriculum said it should. Textbooks kept the Atlantic closed. Official histories left out the fleet that vanished, the currents that connect continents, the stories that would have made Mali a maritime power. Committees chose what counted as evidence and what belonged in the margins. The Mali voyage became a rumor, not a lesson. The Olmec heads became local art, not a link. The tale of Black explorers was boxed out by policy inertia, not just by lack of proof. The silence was not an accident. It was a decision. To protect the myth, the curriculum left out the questions that would have changed everything. Today, textbooks still call America a blank slate before Columbus. Yet every new question cracks that foundation. Erased stories don't vanish. They wait. The past can't be altered, but who claims its legacy shapes tomorrow? History isn't settled. It is contested every time someone dares to look again. Drop your thoughts below.